Today's local and national news from Thailand via the fabulous Pattaya Media Group. And if you'd be kind enough to like and subscribe, here's a tip for you to get the very latest news from us every day. When you subscribe, click on the button that says All. And then every day you'll get an update straight from us. Our guest on Fabulous 103 this morning is the British Ambassador to Thailand, Mark Gooding. Good morning.
Good morning, Tommy. How are you?
Very well indeed.
Good.
Mark, I've got pieces of paper with me because we've had several messages coming in from listeners and viewers.
Great.
Who've asked us to ask you questions. By way of introduction, I don't want to introduce you and do a This Is Your Life, but tell us a little bit about Mark Gooding before you came to Thailand.
Sure. Well, okay. My CV is online so people can see what I've done before. It's a mixture of overseas jobs in Asia and also UK-based jobs in the Foreign Office, focused mostly on Europe.
If you had to describe your role as a British ambassador here in Thailand or anywhere, what actually is your job description as opposed to somebody else within the embassy, specifically the ambassador?
Sure. Well, my job title is His Majesty's Ambassador. So I am the King's representative in Thailand. And in practice, that means I'm the senior member of the British government here in Thailand. So I lead the embassy on the one hand. So it's a team of 160 people.
There's 160 people here?
Yeah. And we've got teams across all different security, economic issues, as well as our consular team helping British nationals. So I lead that effort and I'm responsible for it. But also externally, I'm the representative of the British government in Thailand. So I'm the sort of high-level interlocutor with ministers, business, civil society. So those are the two main areas of work.
So just recently there's been the report of the helicopter crash, which was several years ago, where the Thai billionaire was killed in a helicopter crash as leaving a football match. Now, they've just released the final findings on things like that. Is that something that you have to liaise through to the authorities here? Because it's very high level, isn't it?
Well, yeah, this is a public inquiry in the UK, an investigation, so that body is responsible for communicating their findings and informing people. But if there is a senior British government action that's necessary here in Thailand, then that would fall to me, yes.
Wow. Now, you came here to the embassy in the middle of the COVID era. Mm-hmm. So that must have been a great introduction to Thailand because you weren't allowed to go anywhere.
Yeah, my timing wasn't great.
You could come to work though?
No, I was working remotely most of the time.
Oh, everybody in the embassy worked remotely as well?
Most people. There are a few people that have to come into the embassy, but most of us were working remotely.
How easily, especially as a newcomer, how easy did you find it to work with the Thai government and the Thai authorities through COVID? Because there were an awful lot of Brits here, expats, and tourists that were not sure what was going on, not sure about problems, getting vaccinations. How easy was it?
Well, I would say that, the entire world was thrown into a new situation in 2020 with having to work remotely. So we all had to do things in different ways. And the same challenges that everybody else found, I found and we found at the embassy. So working remotely, so especially starting a job when you can't actually meet people, makes it much more difficult to develop the relationship. People had families around them because if you're working from home, you can't necessarily have a quiet place to work. So those challenges were common to all of us. But I would say that despite that, in 2021, when I started the role, it was still easy to make contact with the Thai government. So we had very good contacts with the Ministry of Public Health, with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, doing two things, one of which is working with them on the vaccine rollout and making sure that people had access to vaccinations, and one of which was communicating with the British community and providing all of our normal consular assistance, albeit sometimes in a different way.
You mentioned the Public Health Department, and that, of course, comes under the leadership, or did, of Kun Anutin, and I know you know him pretty well. Mm-hmm. He has a reputation, whether he deserves it or not, and maybe he doesn't deserve it, of the statement that it was given to him by the Thai press, dirty Falang. Now, actually, I think it was due to him trying to hand a Falang a mask, a foreigner a mask, and the foreigner turning around and saying, I don't want it, which gave him, so he said, this is a dirty Falang. How easy is he to work with? Is he foreigner friendly, or do you find him difficult?
Well, he would obviously have to answer for anything that's attributed to him, but in terms of the working relationship, I found it very positive. So in 2021, one of my first meetings, in fact, was with him to talk about vaccinations. And there were real challenges at that time, both about the supply of vaccines, there weren't enough, and also about the distribution.
And the type.
Well, and the type, indeed, yes. So the distribution sometimes wasn't focused on the most vulnerable, and there were issues with foreigners not having access to vaccination. So those were the immediate issues I needed to talk to him about, and he was very helpful. And it took a little time, and of course, the foreign community in Thailand, bits of it were very unhappy about the situation, but actually it got resolved pretty quickly.
Well, I think in the end we all got free vaccinations.
Yeah, and still do.
Yeah.
And I would say the other thing about Minister Anutin is that he was educated in the UK, so he has a very strong affinity.
Oh dear, so he's going to understand what we've just asked you.
Well, absolutely, he speaks fantastic English. We have a very strong relationship with him.
So you felt that he was giving priority, not special priority, but equal priority perhaps to non-Thais as well as Thais in the country for the treatment?
Yes, I mean, there were two things. Number one is the policy. So to focus on the most vulnerable, irrespective of nationality, and that wasn't always the policy at the beginning, but it became the policy quickly. And the second is making sure that the policy was applied at local level as well as national level. So it's all well and good saying, oh, well, this has to be distributed equitably, but actually if a local hospital says no foreigners, that doesn't help the foreigner trying to get the vaccine at the hospital. So it took a while, but I have to say, I mean, our contacts with the Thai government in trying to solve these issues were positive. It was just an enormous logistical challenge, and it took a little while to solve it.
If you were going to compare the response and the way things were dealt with here in Thailand with the response and similar that was seen by your colleagues, other ambassadors around the world, would you say it was on a par?
I think there were concerns all around the world about vaccination distribution, and the same is true in the UK, of course, because we actually, in the UK, we did set out a long schedule for vaccination according to vulnerability. So people knew which group they were in and roughly when it was going to happen, and it took months for some groups. So people around the world had to wait longer than they wanted, because of course if you've got a pandemic going on and numbers of infections increasing very quickly, it's worrying, it's alarming, and you get frustrated quickly if the vaccination is not available. So I think that was common everywhere. In terms of the response, I think people were understandably worried and concerned. And I think our job was both to try to solve the problem, get access, but also communicate what was going on, because I think part of the worry was about the uncertainty.
It's got to be difficult for anybody, including you, because it's not something you can practice for or study for. It was a worldwide catastrophe, however it came about. It must have been more than just a novelty for everybody. Certainly some sleepless nights for you, I'm sure.
Well, that's right. I mean, it's very difficult, the scale of the thing, and I think one of the real difficulties was that it's all very well sitting in an embassy or a government thinking there's this operational challenge, you've got vaccinations, distribution, flights being cancelled, but actually it's personal for all of us, because we've all got relatives, friends who are in vulnerable categories, who are susceptible to the disease, so you've got a lot of personal pressure, and I think that really would have played on everybody's mind, whether they're working in government or not.
So you've now been the ambassador for how long?
Just over 2 years.
How long is your tenure supposed to be here?
Probably another 3.
Another 3?
Yeah.
Are you going to do a full term?
Absolutely.
This is brilliant. It's good to have somebody here because lots of people who've met you that I've spoken to have found you to be a very genial person. Okay. Now, we've gone through different people at different times in different jobs of importance, and some of them kind of condescending, and some of them are kind of fraffly. But you're somebody, you're not, if I get it right, you're not private school educated. You've pulled yourself up by your own bootstraps, and people find you very easy to deal with.
I mean, on your education point, I went to a private grammar school actually.
Write that down.
Oh, okay. So I have to correct you on that. No, I think the important thing for an ambassador and people across the embassy actually is that we need to be able to communicate with people, to explain what we're doing, but also to listen. There's no point in us running off on one sort of policy or one sort of issue if it's not actually delivering what people need. So I think we've made a point of going out and about, meeting people, really reinforcing our public communications, particularly on social media as well, as a way of trying to demonstrate what we're doing, but also get the feedback.
When we got to speak to you before, we were just coming out of COVID, so nobody could blame you for everything, or anything, in fact, because of the lockdowns and stuff like that. Now you've been in the job for quite a bit. Mm-hmm. What do you feel are your major achievements so far, or the achievements of the embassy under your guidance?
I think there's probably sort of 2 areas. Number one is on the UK-Thailand relationship. We've really tried to broaden it and deepen it in different areas. So in the last 2 years, having had no ministerial visits for some years beforehand, we've had 5 or 6. We've got new agreements and cooperation in areas from counter-terrorism, cyber, agriculture, health and genomics, financial services, digital, all sorts of areas to really try to consolidate that relationship, which I think is great. But second, I hope that we've really reinforced our public communications.
You certainly, you've done this caravan. You were doing a tour around Thailand to major areas and meeting people.
Yeah, that's part of our regular business, of course, and it's not just me. We've got a very active consular team, a trade and commerce department as well. So we have to be out and about. We're sort of a frontline, external-facing organisation that has to be engaging people to understand their views and actually communicate our work.
But when you come away from these things, you've gone to a hotel, the meet and greet, free wine, free cheese sandwiches, and you've talked to people. Obviously, when you get in your car to leave, you make some notes or you debrief yourself. What do you find is the most common thing that people ask you?
It depends which group. I mean, among British nationals, mostly people are interested in who I am, what the embassy's doing. I would say the reception is always very positive and people are happy to have the opportunity.
But what is it that they're asking you?
Yeah,
what is the thing that's like, Mark, I'm having a problem with this, or I don't think this is right?
Yeah, it depends on the time. So obviously in 2021, we were very limited in what we could do, but most of the questions were about COVID and vaccinations and things. We get other issues as well about, what about my pension? Or, I've got this question about my passport being renewed or my sort of relative's visa. So all sorts of questions which are very common. And we have obviously a lot of social media, online information that can answer these questions, but sometimes people have a specific issue within their question that they want to ask about. So that's all very common. One of the reasons we go out to meet people is precisely to be able to answer those questions and find out what they are.
There you go, A+ and A* on those subjects. What do you think you could have done better as a team?
Well, I think it's an interesting question.
Nobody likes that question, by the way.
No, I mean, I always look at what we're doing, both in terms of, are we achieving our objectives as an embassy? Is each team delivering? And there's more we can do. So I'd like to make faster progress on things like the trade relationship and breaking down trade barriers. I'd like to have more collaboration on things like health and genomics, science and technology, all of the sort of, and digital as well, all the sort of sectors that are going to drive our economies in the future.
So is that what you're looking to achieve over the next years?
Yeah, absolutely. So, but I find it easy. I always want to do more, and probably more quickly as well. I think there are issues where we need to communicate better as well. And be very clear with people. And when
communicate with the public, or communicate with the government, or communicate with businesses, which?
All of the above,
all
actually.
Of them.
So I think public particularly. I mean, I have direct contacts with government and business, as does my team. So those are sort of more personal contacts, if you like. But publicly, do people across Thailand know what the British Embassy does?
No.
Well, some do, but some don't. So, is it important that they know? It might be that they don't need to know. But I want them to have a positive impression of the UK. And part of that is, what's going on anyway. So Premier League, UK TV, or, soft power, which happens anyway without the British Embassy. But actually, the British Embassy is doing some really important stuff to promote security of both of our countries, on terrorism, cybercrime, that kind of thing.
Cybercrime's a huge issue now, isn't it?
It is, but also on the economic side, promoting economic development by investing in those new sectors. So, I mean, there's a very positive story about what the British Embassy does, and I want people to understand that so that they look to the UK as a natural partner in all of these areas.
Last month, well, no, actually earlier in the year, but it's now coming into effect now. Thailand's got a new government, and so 90% of the people, no, let's say 60% of the people that you were working with have either changed their departments or they've been replaced. And we're now going over to a coalition government, which means that everybody's got to get new contacts, and those top people are pretty new to their jobs. How are you finding that to deal with?
Completely normal. I mean, when there's an election and there's a change of government, in this case, actually a lot of the parties in the coalition are the same. But it's normal. You have to sort of make new contacts. What I would say is that among senior officials, so the civil servants, there's a lot of continuity. So not
same as the UK, the civil servants don't know.
Mostly. So a lot of our contacts are still there. And among the ministers, there are also some continuity, as you say. So we know some of them already.
Well, Khun Anutin is going to become, or has now become, Thailand's version of the Home Secretary, isn't
Exactly. Yeah. But also what we do as an embassy is we talk to all political parties. So, and that happens all the time, but particularly in recent months, I've made a point of meeting people leaders from all of the parties.
Soundproof windows.
That's right. So we are on Saturn. So, we have good contacts with senior leaders of Per Thai and other parties who are now ministers. So these are not new faces.
Did you expect to be dealing with Move Forward?
I mean, any scenario could have happened, to be honest. I think it is definitely true to say that Move Forward did better in the election than a lot of people expected. And after that, the one scenario was a Move Forward-led government. That didn't happen, so we've now got a Thai-led government.
So you must have been planning and then replanning and then replanning and then replanning as things progressed.
Not really, to be honest. We were monitoring developments very closely, but as I say, over the months and years previously, we talked to all of the parties, and that's not just to say, what's happening in Thai politics. Actually, this is the UK-Thailand relationship that we aspire to. We want to cooperate more on security, on economic, etc. So we've had those discussions with all the parties, and actually, whichever coalition comes about, those are still our priorities, and what's important to us is that whoever's in government understands those.
So. But one of the differences has got to be that the previous government was military, the leadership had a lot of military orientation. Now you're going over to a civilian government. What difference do you expect to see?
Well, there's a change of personality, clearly, because they're different people. So the tone is different. Per Thai, you have to ask Per Thai about their priorities, but clearly they're going to have a big economic focus on livelihood. So that kind of tone is quite normal, I would say, when there's a change of government. Every new government will want to establish itself and make its mark in its own way. So this is normal coalition building.
Do you think, following on from COVID, where we saw the economies stall and tumble as well, and businesses stall and tumble too, especially the tourist industry. Do you think now that the tourist industry within Thailand is valued higher than it was before COVID? Because before COVID, it was almost talked about as an also-ran. And once COVID hit, it was pretty obvious that it was a big one.
If I'm completely honest, I wasn't here before COVID, so the comparison you're asking about, I can't speak with authority, but I know that a huge value has been placed on the tourism sector by successive generations of Thai leaders. Clearly, there were 40 million tourists a year before COVID, so this has been a major source of economic growth and livelihoods for the Thai people. So I think that continues to be a huge priority. What we're seeing now is renewed efforts to get the tourist numbers back up. And we've seen in the early steps of the new government discussion of visas, that kind of thing. So, this is something that we fully support. Of course, Thailand wants to make.
What would you like to see changed in visas?
Visas to Thailand. Well, British nationals, I think they get 30 days entry clearance on arrival. So that's a system that works very well. I think the visa issues under discussion refer to other countries.
Oh, okay. So it's not a problem between.
No, for the UK, for British nationals wanting to visit Thailand on tourism, I think it's a 30-day entry clearance you get on arrival.
Mark, I want to look at a couple of the questions that have come in from listeners and viewers, because we did say that we were going to be talking to you and to the consul later on. So I have to look at my notes here. Here, coming in this one, there have been recently many publicised scams carried out by British expats on British expats. Which is a big concern to a lot of people, and we've covered it in our news. Primarily financial investment scams. Most people who come here, a lot of people who come here are retirees, and they have a bunch of money that they had invested, or they've sold their houses in the UK, that's going to be their future, and they've invested that money, in many cases, with agents in this country who are British, only to find out afterwards it's a scam and that the money's disappeared. I know you can't twist any arms here, really, and it's not an issue for the Thai police, so we're told, except for the fact that these agents don't have work permits, because they can't. But we've been asked if you'd be willing to pass on reports to UK authorities for serious review.
Okay, the first thing I'd say on this issue is that I'm aware of it, and I know the impact of these scams can be absolutely devastating on individuals and families. Absolute sympathy to people who are caught up in this. It's terrible. In terms of the embassy's role, we have two distinct roles. So you're asking about whether we can pass on information to authorities. The answer is yes, we can. We have a National Crime Agency representative here in Bangkok.
Really?
But the responsibility for any investigation and any action lies with the national authorities. So whether it's the Thai police, the UK police, the Thai courts, or the UK courts. So we don't get involved in the process of taking forward investigations and, if necessary, prosecution. But in terms of signposting, in terms of passing information or telling people where they need to report, that is something we can do. Separately, we have our consular team, which provides support for British nationals, and it's important to realise those two teams are separate. They have to be separate. So any kind of, sort of national crime agency work has to be distinct from our consular work. But in terms of providing advice to British nationals about where they can get, for example, access to a lawyer, that's the kind of thing we can support as well.
Yeah, because we're talking about in some cases people losing £500,000. I would guess, best guesstimate right now, is that there have been recently 300 cases reported of expats who have lost their life savings to scammers.
Yep.
Where their money's been supposed to be invested in one thing, it's gone into something else.
Yep.
It's disappeared down the tubes. They've signed pieces of paper that have given authority in some cases to these agents. But in the UK, they have to be licensed. Actually, in Thailand, they have to be licensed too by the Financial Services Authority in Thailand. But the law here prohibits anybody except a Thai selling investments. Nobody can quite figure out who is responsible for investigating that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's an important question. You're right to refer to the law, but also the law enforcement authorities in each country. So obviously, I mean, my starting point with this issue is I'm hugely sympathetic to the families caught up in this. And of course, if people are scammed out of large amounts of money, we want perpetrators to be brought to justice. But that has to be done by the relevant authorities in either country. So where was the crime committed? Who's going to do the investigation? These are legally complex issues, especially for transnational crime if it's online, for example. So I'm not a legal expert on these issues, but we would want the relevant authorities to be, picking up the information that people are providing, and if there's evidence of an offence, then taking forward the relevant criminal proceedings.
Okay. A lot of British expats are smarting from what they feel is the shame of losing the British Embassy for it to be replaced by this building or these
they haven't
these
quite
levels.
lost the British Embassy. We're still here.
Yeah, but we lost the character of the British Embassy. We lost the old ambassador's residence has been replaced. You're in a flat now, aren't you?
I am, yes.
I mean, it's a little bit more than a flat, to be fair. It's
a nice flat.
2 floors of a very beautiful building, and I know that you use them for business purposes as well. It's not just your home. But how do you? Were you here when we had the old embassy?
No, but I did visit it several times in the past. So
and how are your staff adjusting to the new setup here?
Positively. I mean, we have a lot of amenities here. What we also have with the embassy is a sort of purpose-built office block, which is very airy, it's well designed.
Do we own this or do we rent it?
We rent it. So it's, but it works very well as an office space. So it's really good. The former embassy required a huge amount of maintenance. It was quite an old building. So I think when you're talking about the grandeur, you're talking about the ambassador's residence rather than the embassy.
Yes.
Which was a grand building, clearly. What I have now works very well. It's in a great part of town. As you say, it's got a great view of Bangkok. And the most important thing is it is for business purposes. So it has to be a place where the senior people, whether it's ministers, business, other important contacts, where they want to go. And obviously, for residents, it's my personal invitation. It's not something people can't just walk in off the street. And so in my 2 years here, we've had senior members of the royal family, we've had many cabinet ministers, many CEOs. They come around, and when they walk through the door, they say, wow, because it's got a fantastic view. So is it fit for purpose? My answer is clearly yes.
Okay. Another question we have for you. In the old days, back at the old place, in front of the ambassador's residence was a very famous statue of Queen Victoria, and everybody wants to know, where's she gone?
She is still on that site, I believe, on a little side street, yes. The plan is that in the new development, there will be a dedicated garden space open to the public for Queen Victoria, but at the moment she is temporarily on a side street next to the site.
Oh, she's been moved?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
But anyway,
but she's safe?
She is safe, and that's not the long-term plan for her.
Mark, across the board, there have been issues where some of your staff have been angrily and sometimes physically confronted by ticked-off Brits, usually or often where people don't understand what you can and can't do, but definitely when people don't get the answer that they want. Has this become a bigger or a smaller issue?
It's difficult to measure, to be honest. Frankly, it definitely happens. There's not a large number of people, I would say, in this category. But for us, it's absolutely fine. People are often not happy, and if you're talking about British nationals, then
Yeah.
people we deal with are often very vulnerable. They are in a very difficult situation for one reason or another, so they might be upset or angry. So I understand if people want to vent their feelings, want to complain, sometimes offer feedback or criticism, that's all fine. But when it gets either threatening or abusive, then we have to draw a clear line and say that is not acceptable behaviour. So that is where we would take action. I need to do that to protect my team, but also we need to send a clear signal that the British Embassy does not accept that kind of behaviour.
Mark, I know you're a busy man, and you've probably got somebody very important to talk to after us, but thank you so much for your time today. We're looking forward to talking to the British Consul in a moment, and hopefully we can come back and meet you again.
Absolutely. Good to speak to you. Nice to
And
see
you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks.
Local and national news today from Fabulous 103 FM and Fabulous Pattaya Media Group. And to get a notification every time we release another bulletin or programme, like and subscribe to our channel, Fabulous Pattaya Media Group, by using the link below.